for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I'm your co-host.
And my name is Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
Well, Jack, we've got a variety of topics to discuss today. And before we get into that, we have some reminders for our listeners that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us at the iTunes Store under Podcast. Just do a search for Southpaws, and once you've found our logo, you've found us. All links to our podcast go to our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. If you're listening at YouTube, go to youtube.com and do a search for Southpaws Radio there. And you can hear us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and Global Community Radio Channel 1. We're on every Saturday night at 11 p.m., so make sure you listen to us there if you have the opportunity. And, Jack, we are recording today is Friday, June 19th, 2020. This is Juneteenth. This is the anniversary of the official end of slavery in this country.
Yes, it is. It's a day that in this particular climate, in this day of protest, brings on extra meaning. A fact that Donald J. Trump was well aware of when he planned a rally on this day and now has moved it to one day off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of Trump, did you hear his comments on Thursday where he said that nobody had heard of Juneteenth until he had talked about it? He made it famous.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's all about him.
Yeah, Trump is a lot like some bosses that I've had. Anything that worked out in the favor of him is his fault. Anything that didn't work out so well was somebody else's fault. So he takes all the credit and none of the blame.
Well, the celebration that we should be having is a renewed interest and progress made with the racial hypocrisy in history of this country. And Trump is one to, like a leech, latch onto any current movement and trying to make it his own, including the Kaepernick. I am absolutely disgusted when I hear him come out and say that Kaepernick deserves another chance. Deserves another chance after his initial comments on Kaepernick were to fire him.
Fire the son of a bitch.
Yeah, and fire anybody who put his knee on the ground. And the only reason he's back right now is he looks at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a majority of people now that think Kaepernick was a brave leader, and he was, and that he was robbed of his career, and that he should get it back. I say he should go on strike, and every black athlete in the NFL should go on strike, and demand that until he signs, they won't step on the field. Forget their knee, they won't step onto the billion-dollar industry field. And I hope that happens. I don't know, but
I would love to see it happen. I would love to see it happen across all sports.
Yeah, oh yeah, particularly baseball right now. They're having a lot of trouble, the players and the owners.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets down to it. It's just a big corporate industry that cranks out billions of dollars, and the athletes are the contemporary slaves. I mean, in the NFL, they give up their body, they give up their brain cells, and a lot of them, after 4 or 5 years of making money, they never work again. So I hope they go on strike, and I hope that Kaepernick becomes as big a name and figure as Martin Luther King. I mean that sincerely. I know he doesn't have the gravitas, the history of speaking, but what he did is an example of bravery for every black young American. It's incredible, unmatchable.
It is. I think he will. I think he will go down in history as one of the more important figures in black culture.
Yeah. He just won an award. I can't remember what it was, a national large award. They have an Amnesty International. I don't know, but he's our contemporary black leader in my book. At one time it was Martin Luther King, and then it was Malcolm X. But this is the man that the youth looks to today.
Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, it was Jackson, sure.
Well, there are some things that are changing because of some of the awareness that we should have been aware of a long time ago, but Americans are stubborn to change. Americans just don't like change in particular.
Right.
Well, some changes are coming. I have this story. This is Ben Kesslin writing for NBC News. This is dated June 17th. The Aunt Jemima brand of syrup and pancake mix will get a new name and image, Quaker Oats announced Wednesday, saying the company recognizes that Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype. Gee, you think? Let me continue the story here. The 130-year-old brand features a black woman named Aunt Jemima, who was originally dressed as a minstrel character. The picture has changed over time, and in recent years, Quaker removed the mammy kerchief from the character to blunt growing criticism that the brand perpetuated a racist stereotype that dated to the days of slavery. Quaker, a subsidiary of PepsiCo, said removing the image and name is part of an effort by the company, quote, to make progress toward racial equality, end of quote. And it goes on from there, and it's not just Aunt Jemima. Now there's talk that they're going to have to do an overhaul of Mrs. Butterworth or get rid of the brand entirely for the same reasons. Uncle Ben's Rice, same thing. They're talking about an overhaul there.
Yeah.
Did you ever think this would happen?
Well, it's a cultural revolution, and I hope it keeps going. It's picking up speed and energy. The biggest aspect is the removal of all these tributes to Confederate soldiers, these monuments.
These statues and getting rid of the flag. I mean, we talked last week on the show about NASCAR banning the display of the Confederate flag at their sanctioned races. We talked about the U.S. Marine Corps removing the Confederate flag from their bases.
Yeah, and these things have been right in front of our face for decades.
They have. Speaking of statues, you brought this story to my attention, Jack. This is Justin Kolar writing for Wood Television. You wouldn't think that Michigan would have Confederate statues. After all, we were part of the Union, correct? Well,
exactly.
Apparently we do, and we have one right in our own backyard. Here's the story. This was published on June 19th. Listen to this. A controversial statue in Allendale displaying a Confederate and Union soldier together with a young slave looked different Thursday night. Mitch Kale of the Michigan Association of Civil Rights Activists, who, by the way, has been a previous guest on this show, he's spearheading the effort to remove the statue. He told News 8 that two people covered the statue in a plastic bag and stuck notes calling the statue racist. He previously said a group of Grand Valley State University students did it. One such note read this, quote, "This is a glorification of a racist past that has no place in a public space," end of quote.
Exactly.
The Sons of Confederate Veterans, a group who supports the statue, told News 8 in a statement, quote, "Confederate flags and monuments have largely been viewed as positive symbols around the globe." Hold on a second. By who? Racists? The Ku Klux Klan? Let me continue the quote here. "We, the Michigan camps of the SCV, wholeheartedly condemn any and all efforts to remove Confederate flags, monuments, and symbols from the public eye." End of quote. Again.
Darren, help me out. Help me.
Yeah.
Did she say the Michigan chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy?
No, this is the Sons of Confederate Veterans.
The Sons of Confederate
I've
Veterans.
never heard of this group before.
This is a group here in Michigan, and the state did lost a number of thousands of people fighting the Confederates. And they're sitting up here in Michigan?
That's what it sounds like. It doesn't say where they're based out of, but I would imagine they have a Michigan chapter. Let me continue the story real quick here. They say any effort to remove the statue and others like it is, quote, an attack on the honorable heritage of over 70 million Americans of every race and creed who carry the blood of Confederate veterans in their veins. End of quote.
I don't have any in my veins, and I don't want any in my veins.
I'm sure I probably do somewhere within my family because, both of my parents are originally from Kentucky.
Well, I think that was a split state to some degree, but how reread that? They share the great history. What was it?
They called it, quote, an attack on the honorable heritage of over 70 million Americans of every race and creed who carry the blood of Confederate veterans in their veins. Well,
how do you call that honorable?
Well, I can tell you this. They say every race and creed. I can tell you why that happened. Because I'm pretty sure that there were some slave owners that raped their slaves and produced children with them.
I'm pretty sure as well.
Thomas Jefferson, for one, that's proven history. Yeah, that was way before the Confederacy was even thought of, but still, the fact remains that these slaves were taken advantage of in every way, shape, and form you can imagine, in even ways you can't.
Yeah, even Thomas Jefferson took advantage. Mm-hmm. But, Darren, I want to mention, I worked in Allendale for a number of years. I taught school at the university, and I coached at the university, and then I even coached at the high school in Allendale. Mm-hmm. So I'm very familiar with that area. I'm familiar with that park. I'm also familiar with the amount of pickup trucks that will be surrounding that park to protect it. The idiots out there grow like the little trees in the muck that grow out there that they supply, and the flower baskets that they supply to Michigan. They're ubiquitous, and they're meeting on this. I think it's 7 o'clock Monday in the township. Will be headed by a supervisor whose name is Adam Ellenboss. Adam Ellenboss is the Allendale Township supervisor. Ellenboss also is an executive member of the Republican Party's leadership executive council in Ottawa County. A bit of a conflict of interest, I would think. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, he was on record last week as saying that display, which has a Confederate soldier next to a Union soldier and a black baby at the feet of the Confederate soldier, should not be removed because it is representative of a pivotal time in our history. I left him a message asking, well, wouldn't you then want to have a statue with a Japanese soldier and an American soldier? That was a pivotal time in our history. Or a German soldier, or a Spanish soldier, Spanish-American War. How do you say that to have a statue of our enemies at any war, at any junction, is necessary to uphold historical tradition? It's laughable, it's ridiculous, and I hope that people go out there Monday evening at 7 o'clock and stare down and shout down the Confederacy, because it'll be there in full force. Mm-hmm. You'll see them drive in. It'll be there with the ridiculous claim that this is a ruination of history. The history that I've learned, I did not learn by reading statues. I read books. I had what they called history teachers who had books, who had references, and that's recorded history. They weren't worried about history when they tore the statues of Saddam Hussein down in Iran, or when they burnt the remnants of the museums all across the Mideast. Some of them predated the United States by centuries. Mm-hmm. There's no concern then by the right wing for preservation of history.
Jack, I don't see any statues of Hitler standing in Germany anywhere.
Yeah, I learned a lot about Hitler and Mussolini, and I've never seen a statue. And I was in Germany last summer. There were no statues of Adolf Hitler.
You didn't see anybody driving around in their pickup truck with a swastika flag? No. I hope.
No, I didn't.
No, if you display the swastika flag in Germany, you go to jail for a couple of years at least. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 or €200 in their case, I guess. Oh boy. By the way, the statue was uncovered Friday morning and everything had been removed. The statue appeared to be left undamaged. As you mentioned, Jack, there is a meeting Monday evening at 7 p.m. at the Allendale Township Hall on Lake Michigan Drive. There will be time for public comments, so go out there and give them hell, because this is just ridiculous. Unbelievable. Yeah. I never imagined that we would have a Confederate statue in Michigan.
The amount of them down south, they're hidden in plain view. Mm-hmm. We do know that there's statues in Detroit on the east side of a guy named Cass, who just happened to be on maybe the most racist president until the current president, whose name was Andrew Jackson, father of the march from North Carolina to Oklahoma with the Native Americans. But his cabinet had a man named Cass. I think John Cass. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Who was a slave owner. And we have a county named after him. Isn't there a county in Michigan? Cass County?
Cass County.
Statues, very reputable high school with a great athletic history, all named Cass. The other guy who was on the same cabinet with Cass was a man named Calhoun, who was a vehement racist. And
now there's now an effort to get the name of Calhoun County changed in Michigan.
Exactly. Tear it down. Get the names down. Get Custer's trophy monument torn down. A purge is a purge.
Yeah.
If it's bad enough you got to tear one down, it's bad enough you've got to tear them all down.
Absolutely.
You don't stop. If I get rid of cockroaches in my house, I don't kill 2 or 3 of them and say, "Here, what do you think of that, guys?" Yeah. See how sincere I am? No. Eradicate them.
That's right. Speaking of, there's a great article. This is by James Stout. It was published June 15th. Of all places, Popular Mechanics. The headline, How to Topple a Statue Using Science. Did you ever think the Popular Mechanics would publish an article teaching you how to tear down statues without getting injured?
Well, that's practical.
Mm-hmm. Here's what the article says. It hasn't been a great past few weeks for statues. From Bristol, England to Birmingham, Alabama, people all over the world have been grappling with the legacy of racism by tossing their grappling hooks around the heads of problematic monuments. Should you happen to find yourself near a statue that you decide you no longer like, we ask scientists for the best, safest ways to bring it to the ground without anyone getting hurt. Except, of course, for the inanimate racist who's been dead for a century anyway. By the way, they put a disclaimer on this article that reads that this article is being presented only to describe the physics and mechanics of removing statues in light of national attention being drawn to the removal of Confederate monuments and statues. Popular Mechanics is not encouraging anyone to remove any statues. There is a risk of injury whenever you try to remove or destroy a statue, even if you were to apply information presented in this article.
That's good.
So yeah, they talked to mechanical engineers that said, here's how you do it.
I'm going to make copies of that and then drop the leaflets all over Allendale campus of Grand Valley State University.
Oh, God, that would be funny.
By the way, I am so proud that they took that stand. Very much.
Yeah.
That they went over to the statues and left those notes.
Yeah.
That gives me hope. It really does. And we need it.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah.
Darren, were you going to mention it this time as kind of a pause? The shouting match took place yesterday between 2 people on our federal, I think it was in Congress, if I'm not mistaken, between Matt Gaetz and a gentleman named Richmond. I don't know his first name.
Oh, I can get to that story real quick here. Now, this is something else. I didn't hear about this until you sent it to me. This is an article from Business Insider. This is Sonam Seth writing on Thursday. Florida Representative Matt Gaetz said on Thursday that he lives with a Cuban immigrant named Nestor, whom he calls his son. This is my son.
I can't believe he went out on a limb on this. This is going to snap behind him. You watch.
I hope so. Let's go a little further into the article here. Gaetz tweeted along with a photo of him and the man he identified as Nestor this, quote, For all those wondering, this is my son Nestor. We share no blood, but he is my life. He came from Cuba, legally of course, 6 years ago and lives with me in Florida. I am so proud of him, and raising him has been the best, most rewarding thing I've done in my life. End of quote. In a follow-up tweet, Gaetz wrote that Nestor turned 19 a few days ago and will be off to university. Quote, he arrived here at 12. As you can imagine, I was triggered when, to make an absurd debate point, a fellow congressman diminished the contributions of Republicans because we don't raise non-white kids. Well, I have. End of quote. The Florida congressman's tweets came after he made headlines the previous day for getting into a shouting match with Louisiana Representative Cedric Richmond during a House Judiciary Committee hearing on police reform. After Richmond discussed the injustice the black people like him and his son face, Gaetz interjected and asked, quote, are you suggesting that you're certain none of us have non-white children because you reflect on your black son and you said none of us could understand? End of quote. Richmond cut Gaetz off saying, quote, I'm not about to get sidetracked about the color of our children. We're talking about black people in the streets that are getting killed. And if one of them happens to be your kid, I'm concerned about him too. And clearly I'm more concerned about him than you are. So let's be clear about that. End of quote. Mm-hmm. Gaetz shot back, quote, you're claiming you have more concern for my family than I do? Who the hell do you think you are? This is outrageous. End of quote. Shortly after Gaetz tweeted on Thursday that Nestor is his son, the hashtag #FreeNestor began trending on Twitter as several users suggested without evidence that Nestor hadn't consented to the congressman posting photos of him. Oh, God.
Yeah, I'd like to know how a single man, how he can adopt a 12-year-old boy, keep that secret, right? Keep it secret for all these years. I guess he's 19, so that's 7 years. Reveals it there at the Congress and uses it to try to denigrate a man, a black man, who knows how problematic it is right now to send your children out the door, not knowing you're going to see them again. And he tries to balance that out. Mm-hmm. I think that what you're going to see is a lot of people with accusations of impropriety over having this 12-year-old brought into his house.
Well, I can tell you how he adopted him. When you've got money and when you've got power, you can get anything you want.
Get a toy from Cuba.
Period. There's people out there that have been trying to adopt for years and have been unable to. And you know the difference? Money and power. Yep. There it is.
That's like buying a car.
Well, let me continue here. Former California Representative Katie Hill, who resigned from Congress last year, later weighed in on the matter. Katie Hill was the congressman that resigned after somebody, possibly even her former husband, my opinion, published nude photos of her, if I remember the story correctly here.
That's right. I remember it.
So Hill tweeted this, quote, many of you know Matt Gaetz and I have an unlikely friendship. I can't stand a lot of his beliefs, but he's been there for me when others haven't. He talks about Nestor more than anything, has done so much for his son, and is truly a proud dad. This hashtag #FreeNestor thing is bullshit. Stop. End of quote. So that's coming from a former Democratic congresswoman.
Well, you watch. The movement right now that we have taking place is one, as the black congressman mentioned, deals with the violence and the brutality that they've experienced in the black community and the effect on the parents and their children, none of which Gaetz is experiencing. Yeah. But to use it as an equivalency to what the black issue is today, to have a light-skinned Cuban in your home and you're a wealthy senator or whatever the hell he is completely non-comparable.
Well, I'm waiting for Gaetz to say that all lives matter. That'll be next.
Oh, you know they will. That's their mantra.
Well, Katie Hill continued in a second tweet where she wrote this, quote, also, he was never hiding his son. He was trying to protect him from the crap that comes from being a politician's kid, especially after what Nestor had been through, especially in this political climate. Now that Nestor has grown, he's made his own choice to enter the spotlight. Good for them. End of quote. Jose Felix Diaz, an executive vice president at the political consulting firm Ballard Partners, also posted a tweet defending Gaetz, writing, quote, "I am seeing so many hateful comments about Matt Gaetz and Nestor. When that kid lost his mom, Matt was dating his sister and he stepped up. Plain and simple. He has been an outstanding role model and mentor for Nestor, and anyone that served with Matt knows this great kid." End of quote. The Florida congressman has posted photographs and videos that feature Nestor before, but Thursday was the first time he publicly referred to Nestor, who is a former House of Representatives page, as his son. In March 2016, Gaetz posted a photo on Facebook of him and two local students, one of whom is Nestor. The post said, quote, "It was great working with local students Sophia Burleson and Nestor Galbin in Tallahassee this past week. They were fantastic house pages." End of quote. Gaetz also posted a video in December 2017 in which he referred to Nestor as his helper. Gaetz's sister Erin also tweeted out several older photos of Gaetz and Nestor. The congressman's office did not immediately respond to questions about whether Nestor had consented to Gaetz posting the tweets about him on Thursday or if he considers Gaetz a parent. So,
relevant questions, I might add.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I'm sure that this won't be the last that we hear of this. I'm sure there will be more.
There's going to be a lot more. Yeah. There's going to be a lot more in the entire atmosphere and environment we're in right now, where we're not going to see an abatement. The push to clean out, to purge the historical travesty that this country experienced. We're a country that was built off of theft, a continent, an entire nation from the indigenous people, and to a theft, then a theft on the other side of the ocean, bringing people in to work the country that we stole. That's the rocket launch for our country. That, we were told that these were people looking to a new continent where democracy would reign, where there was absolute freedom from the kings of Europe and the monarchies, and that this was going to be the petri dish for unparalleled democracy. When in fact, it was businessmen coming over, funding ships, asking for gold to be sent back. Instead of gold, they didn't get much gold, so they got human bodies in the forms of slaves. And that's not the history that the kids in the fifth grade were taught. They didn't know anything was wrong with Columbus. They're scratching their head saying, what the hell's wrong with Columbus statues? Well, they're finding out now. They're finding out the real pinnings of this country. It was the largest geographic genocide in the history of the world. There were 20 million Native Americans in North America. When the white man stepped foot on this country and claimed it, by the way, Columbus claimed it for the Pope. Mm-hmm. So this is ours. The Pope's this whole land. I don't know what equator line it was cordoned off. They stuck a cross in, and then right behind that cross came chains of slavery and ruination of a beautiful people. Well, that's the history now that we're looking at. That's been hidden. I recommend to our listeners a book called The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Yep. Another one's called The Lies That My Teacher Told Me.
Really? I haven't heard that one.
No, it's fantastic. Fantastic. It takes big lies, little lies. Little lies like the fact that, remember, George Washington never told a lie?
Mm-hmm.
Remember? I thought, no wonder he's a president. He never told a lie.
Yeah.
I got to wondering, though, somewhere around the 8th grade, how you threw $1 across the Potomac River, because I'd seen the Potomac River. I had relatives out there. And you couldn't, there's no way you could throw $1. But those are the small deceptions.
Well, you also got to remember, too, that Columbus's trip over here was bankrolled by the Spanish monarchy.
Oh, exactly it was. So was the Pilgrims.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't coming looking for religious freedom. That's all hype.
Yeah.
Total hype.
Yeah. It's been close to 25 years. I was in the town where Christopher Columbus died, Valladolid, Spain.
Oh, really?
Yes. The town that gave the world Don Quixote also was the town where Columbus died.
How fitting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there have been, I learned history this week. There was a post that was I can't remember what the reference was. It talked about Columbus selling 9 and 10-year-old girls for sex to soldiers. And they actually had the price. 150, I don't know what the currency was.
Yeah,
that history is not being taught. How about the history of the fact that to get gold, he took Native Americans, put them in mines, and told them to dig all day. And it was so bad, it was so hot, that they would try to commit suicide by eating dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So he developed a mask. Maybe he's the father of the catcher's mask. Who knows? They put a mask on these people, strapped it on their heads so they could not kill themselves, even though they desired it. It was so terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's the history. And then the Native Americans, we talked about this, their horrid history, not being taught. Never. It's just not there. And it's coming to light now. You're going to see it spread from the black issues. The Washington Redskins are going to be challenged. The
Cleveland Indians,
all of these races, monikers are going to be put into the light, and they should be.
Yes, they should. You've been talking about masks. I want to change gears for a little bit and start talking about the coronavirus, because a new story was published by NBC News just Friday morning. They're now saying, the experts are, Florida is going to be the new epicenter of the second wave of the coronavirus. Maybe it's a continuation of the first wave.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure.
Mm-hmm.
Other big hot spots are Arizona and Texas. And this comes on, and you know what they said is the reason that this is spreading like crazy? Refusal to wear masks.
Yeah.
Oh, I
exactly.
don't want to wear a mask. I'm not going to wear a mask. That's my freedom. I'm free. I'm free to die. I'm free to not wear a mask and infect other people with my germs. As a matter of fact, AMC, one of the largest theater chains in the country, they're planning on reopening their theaters within the next few days. They have said that they are not going to require masks in their theaters.
Outrageous.
And if
there's a group that's burning masks, and their motto is "Ignite for Freedom."
I saw one lighting a mask inside of a cast iron skillet. I'm looking at the picture going, that's not how you season a skillet.
Did you see the Republican sheriff down in Arizona? Speaking of Arizona, he vowed not to enforce Arizona's coronavirus restrictions. He just tested positive for virus. Yeah. I posted on that. Mamas, don't let your sons grow up to be conservative cowboys.
Yeah.
Because he had his hat on and looked like a tough guy, but he won't be tough for long.
His Mamas, don't let you... No, you don't want to hear me sing. But you do want to hear some music, though, don't you?
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, that's hammer time. Since we're talking about masks, let's go into our next segment. It's time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week, and we have two winners, so we got to play this clip as well.
The double douche.
Who is that guy?
Gentlemen, Wade Garrett.
Holy sh**.
Exactly right.
That's right. So, winner number one this week is conservative activist Brandon Straka. I have this story. This is from ABC News, from Mina Kaji, Lena Camaletti, and Gio Benitez. This is dated June 18th. American Airlines is banning the passenger who was kicked off of a flight after refusing to wear a face covering as airlines step up enforcement of mandatory mask requirements. Conservative activist Brandon Straka is the first passenger reported to be banned by a major U.S. airline after they doubled down on their mask policies this week following complaints that they were not being enforced. A spokesperson for the airline explained that Straka will be banned from flying American for as long as its mask requirements are in place. The airline said in a statement, quote, American Airlines thoroughly reviewed an incident on June 17 involving one of our customers, Brandon Straka. As a result of this review, Mr. Straka will not be permitted to fly American as he failed to comply with our stated policy and crew member instructions. We expect customers who choose to fly with us to comply with these policies, and if necessary, we will deny future travel for customers who refuse to do so. Restricting travel is a step we take very seriously, and it will only occur after a comprehensive review of the facts of an incident. Mr. Straka will be permitted to fly with us once face coverings are no longer required for customers. End of quote. Straka declined to wear a face covering after boarding his flight from LaGuardia Airport in New York City to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Wednesday, the airline confirmed in a statement. Part of the statement read, quote, after he refused to comply with the instructions provided by the flight crew, our team members asked him to deplane. End of quote. By the way, Straka recorded parts of the incident on board the aircraft. He told the flight attendant, quote, you're asking me to do something that's not a law, end of quote. The flight attendant responded that it is, quote, procedure American Airlines follows, end of quote. There is no federal mandate requiring passengers to wear masks on board a plane, but by May 11th, all major U.S. airlines put new policies in place stating that passengers and crew have to wear face coverings in order to fly. Exceptions exist for kids, passengers eating and drinking, and for those with certain medical conditions. The last thing Straka says before the flight attendant asks him to step off the aircraft is that he doesn't like wearing masks, according to the video that he filmed. And by the way, he later claimed that he's got a medical issue. I don't believe that for a second.
He does have a mental issue. Oh, sorry, you said no.
Let me continue here. Straka founded the hashtag #WalkAway campaign, which encourages people to leave the Democratic Party of today, according to its site. By the way, the site sells face masks for $20. So the guy that doesn't want to wear a mask is selling them for $20 a pop.
Wow.
Unbelievable. In a video that he posted to Periscope, Straka said, quote, this is insane, absolutely insane. We don't even have a choice anymore. End of quote. Straka told ABC News that after being kicked off the first flight, he disclosed to the airline that he couldn't wear a mask due to a medical condition. The airline is not allowed to legally ask Straka to reveal his medical condition. But there's another video where they did ask him for documentation. That is legal.
Yeah.
They can ask for documentation. The documentation doesn't have to be specific and can just say, I am Dr. So-and-so. So-and-so is a patient of mine. This patient is not required to wear a mask as he has a medical condition that would preclude him from doing so. That's all the letter needs to say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but that's a violation of HIPAA. No, it isn't. Read HIPAA, folks.
No, I agree with the airline's stance. Yep. The only thing I disagree with is they should have asked him to the plane at about 10,000 feet.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh, gosh. Let me continue real quick here. Straka said he was able to board a second flight to Seattle connecting in Charlotte without a mask. By the way, this guy is on his way to Tulsa for, guess what? The big Trump rally, where they're not requiring masks in there as well. And now local officials are starting to panic.
They should be.
Yep. And Straka has been a speaker at previous Trump rallies. Let me add that, too, just to make that clear. And then our other winner this week, this is the winning story. There's two winners to this story here. This is from Fox 17 WXMI in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The actual story was reported by CNN News Source. This is dated June 16th. Days after NASCAR's only African-American driver drove a car with a Black Lives Matter paint scheme, a second racer drove a car with a pro-police paint scheme. Kyle Weatherman drove a car adorned with a thin blue line flag, a black and white American flag with one blue stripe, and the hashtag Back the Blue during Sunday's Dixie Vodka 400. He actually did not race in that race. The race was actually the Hooters 250, which is the Xfinity Series, the minor league series of NASCAR.
Oh, just like the guy that retired, who hadn't won a race in 80-some starts, or 50, whatever it was.
Yeah, he had 32 races. He quit, and everything's for sale. his cars, the hauler, the tools, everything. He wants no part of NASCAR now because they banned the Confederate flag.
Well, he doesn't have to save his reputation. He just gave that away. He exposed it. His only notoriety came by making a stink on the wrong side of history, not because he could drive. It sounds like this guy's the same league.
Let me continue the story here. While Weatherman's car did specifically mention the Blue Lives Matter movement, the thin blue line flag is used as an emblem by the organization. Blue Lives Matter is a pro-police group. Critics say the group's formation directly countered the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, of course it did.
Yeah, that's a nice word for it. Countered. Confronted. It's better.
Yeah, and I believe the owner is MHR Racing, and I forget what the owner's name is. Let me continue the story here. On Wednesday, driver Bubba Wallace's number 43 car painted with a Black Lives Matter paint scheme, which included an image of a black person and a white person shaking hands on the hood of his car, along with the words compassion, love, and understanding. It should say that he drove the number 43 car. By the way, we mentioned that last week. And again, kudos to the king of NASCAR, Richard Petty, for making this happen.
Exactly.
As he is the owner of the number 43 car. NASCAR has made several steps to address racism as protests against racism and police brutality take place across the country. Last week, NASCAR announced that it would no longer permit fans to fly the Confederate flag at its events. Instead, it would allow drivers to demonstrate during the national anthem. So those are our two winners this week. Brandon Straka for not wearing a mask, Kyle Weatherman and MHR Racing for running a Back the Blue car. So to those guys, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
That's right.
Honorable winners, Darren. Good selection.
Yeah. I don't know about honorable would be the best word for it. Because they have no honor. God, now I'm going to start sounding like A Few Good Men. They have no honor. They have no code.
I remember that line, yeah. But before we leave the virus issue, I think it's noteworthy to see the study that just came out exposing the fact that in the Bible Belt, fundamentalists are dying in frightening numbers, including last month, a fundamentalist preacher from Virginia who had claimed that the whole mask phenomena was really mass hysteria, play on mask, right? Around the pandemic. And that really all it was just a media plot against Trump. This minister died from the virus, along with 30 other pastors just in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, Jack, that's an old
outrageous.
And that's an old article. The article was published April 29th, and it's gotten worse. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And these guys led not just the pastors, but who knows how many hundreds of parishioners into the same bed of death. And the Bible Belt, the South, is, well, you said Florida now, is leading. It's the new epicenter.
Yeah.
We know Texas is right there with them. Arizona, see it spiking.
Yeah.
This is the cracker belt down through there.
It sure is.
They thought they'd get away with early openings. They thought they'd get away with denying wearing a mask, and now they're dying like flies. They're dying like flies. The service, in the same service or survey, it showed that 90% of Christian congregations, 90% nationwide, observed social distancing and suspended in-person gatherings. But guess who didn't? Guess who refused? Guess who makes up the other 10%? The snake handler, redneck, conservative Christians of the Bible Belt. And it's funny. God's not sending any help, is he?
No.
We don't see any angels coming in and stopping these quote devoted Christians from dying. Whether you're a Republican sheriff in Arizona or you're a redneck Christian conservative, you're dying just as fast as the tree huggers. And there's no distinction being made. So, you know what? I think we need to take these notes down and remember them. We need to look at this right here is scientific. This is showing us that when you don't wear the mask and you refuse the distancing, you will pay for it in death. And Mother Nature does not care. No exceptions.
Yeah. Well, you've got these conservatives that say, oh, but all these people that were protesting Black Lives Matter, they're going to make it go up too. They're not social distancing. Well, there was a story that was just published in the Wall Street Journal, not a liberal magazine, not a liberal rag, the Wall Street Journal, one of the most conservative, corporate slanted publications ever. Yep. And that story said they're not finding that with these protests because people are wearing masks. Yes.
It's that simple. Again, more scientific evidence. If we dare to live our life by evidence and science, the marchers that protested the Floyd murder all wore masks, and they're not seeing numbers at all indicative of a spike from their protest.
They're science deniers.
That was in the Wall Street Journal. Huh?
That was in the Wall Street Journal. That said that they are finding no evidence of COVID-19 spikes where there have been protests.
No evidence of increased COVID spikes where there were protests, folks.
Zero so far.
That's your science lesson for today. And what you have to do is draw a hypothesis. You have to say why. Is it because Mother Nature didn't want to, because they had a worthy cause? No. It's because they had these things in the front of their faces called masks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the conclusion you have to draw.
As a matter of fact, just a few days ago, there was an NBC reporter, and I forget if it was Jolene Kent or if it was somebody with CNBC. I forget. Might have been Jolene Kent. I'll have to go back and look. Where she was given 4 different Petri dishes, and she was told to cough into each Petri dish. 1 wearing a cloth mask, 1 wearing a surgical mask, 1 wearing an N95 mask, and 1 with no mask. Now, Petri dishes aren't going to show the presence of viruses because that's totally different. But it will show bacteria, and you might as well just equate the two because, yeah, they work differently, but they can still make you sick. So, if there's bacteria, there's probably some viruses too, folks. They sent the Petri dishes, and they checked them. After 24 hours, the Petri dish that she coughed into without a mask already had growth in the Petri dish.
Wow.
And they checked the dishes again after 48 hours and after 60 hours. And the only dish that had any type of growth in it was the one with no mask.
Yeah.
So
that's the kind of evidence you need to live your life by, ladies and gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Not a mythical talking snake sky god. There's no proof to that. But you just heard a lab experiment that proves something. It's not a debate. It proved it.
Yeah. And it wasn't even in a lab. They sent the Petri dishes to her house.
Wow.
And then she sent them to a lab. A courier came and picked them up and took them to the lab and put them in an incubator.
I see Fauci said, hey, folks, get prepared. There may not be any football this fall. It may because it is too friggin' dangerous. And he said what's really perpetuating the virus at this moment, and there are states all across the United States seeing unparalleled spikes. What's driving it, according to Fauci, is bias against science.
That's very true. By the way, the article that you mentioned, Jack, if anybody wants to read it, it's at pathos.com. It's from Michael Stone. It's dated April 29th of this year. The headline is, Report, Bible Belt Christians are dying after ignoring social distancing guidelines. We'll post a link to that to our official Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show, you'll find it there as well.
Good article.
Yes, it is. I want to get to a couple of other stories here. We got some court cases to talk about. I have this. This is Pete Williams writing for NBC News. This is dated June 15th. The Supreme Court's been busy this week, folks. So on Monday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that existing federal law forbids job discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or transgender status, a major victory for advocates of gay rights and for the nascent transgender rights movement, and a surprising one from an increasingly conservative court. Again, the vote was 6-3. The court said Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which makes it illegal for employers to discriminate because of a person's sex, among other factors, also covers sexual orientation and transgender status. It upheld rulings from lower courts that said sexual orientation discrimination was a form of sex discrimination. Equally surprising was that the decision was written by Donald Trump's first Supreme Court appointee, Neil Gorsuch.
That is shocking.
Who was joined by Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's 4 more liberal members to form a majority. So that's something.
That's not the biggest one, though. There's another one.
There was another one that happened later in the week, 5-4. The Supreme Court, again, Justice Roberts, writing the opinion, said that Trump illegally tried to end the DACA program. He didn't do it the right way. Try again, which you know Trump's going to do.
Yeah. Rather than rejecting it on principle.
Yeah.
You know, you say it was sloppily prepared. So they'll be back. But those two are major victories, especially emanating from a conservative court. Federal law, you cannot discriminate because of sex for a job, and the Dreamers get an extension. Now you need to fight like mad, so that because he'll come back gangbusters.
Mm-hmm. And we have one more court ruling that we need to talk about. It's something that we discussed several weeks ago on this show. This article is from Jennifer Chambers, writing for the Detroit News. This is dated June 10th and updated June 11th. A federal appeals court on Wednesday of last week dismissed an appeal in a historic case that granted Detroit students a fundamental but limited right to literacy under the U.S. Constitution, allowing a settlement to move forward with no further legal hurdles.
Good.
All 16 judges on the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals signed an order saying an appeal filed in the case is dismissed based on the recent settlement announced between Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Detroit school children who sued the state over their substandard public education. The settlement rendered the question moot, the court wrote in its order. The decision means the landmark case will not be heard by the full panel en banc, as the court had previously announced, and ensures the May 14th settlement can be carried out between the state and Detroit students. Well, let me stop there. Where's this coming from? Several years ago, several Detroit public school students sued the state of Michigan and sued Governor Rick Snyder, saying that because they received a substandard education from the Detroit public schools because of budget cuts, because of lack of teachers, a lack of textbooks, etc., the lack of a quality public education denied them other rights guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution, including rights to vote, rights to enlist in the military, and other rights.
Mm-hmm.
And Snyder fought this. The Michigan legislature fought this. Well, when Governor Gretchen Whitmer was elected in 2018 and took office on January 1st, 2019, she decided, nope, we're going to settle this, which is her right to do so. It's stated in the Michigan State Constitution that the governor, when she's sued or he is sued, can settle without the approval of the legislature. So Governor Whitmer agreed with the students and said, okay, we'll settle, and they made terms on it, and you can read it in the article, and by the way, that article's on our Facebook page. But the Michigan legislature, led by who? Republicans, said, oh no, we don't like this. So they tried to appeal to the Sixth Circuit, and the Sixth Circuit said, nope, this is over. She's allowed to settle. Done.
Yep, done. And I'll tell you who might also follow in the tracks of that precedent. That's Grand Rapids students, disadvantaged minority students.
Yep.
Every year they're tested at single-digit reading levels on the day of their graduation, and that's been going on for a long time. At the heart of the case in Detroit was the inability to read. If you can't train students to read, you're prohibiting them from future learning, That's the key to attaining knowledge, and without it, you pretty much are stymied and have a cap over your intelligence growth for the rest of your life. And the schools are failing in that regard in Detroit and in Grand Rapids. End of story. It was proven in court. I know it by example. I saw the reading levels, seniors, they could read maybe 5th and 6th grade. Many, many seniors in the second-tier schools here in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And that's 7,000.
Yeah. And now there's talk about cutting funding some more.
Yeah, what's that going to do?
No.
Slashing funding.
Yeah, that's about what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cutting sounds humane. What the Grand Rapids Public Schools is considering is inhumane.
Yes, it is.
So that I'm sure that's something that you're going to be following for us.
Yeah, we're fighting that right now.
Yep.
We really are. Yeah.
Yep. And real quickly, one place that apparently isn't going to be getting cut anytime soon is the Grand Rapids Police Department funding. Because there is a part of the city charter that says that at minimum, the Grand Rapids Police Department will receive 32% of the city's budget.
At minimum.
At minimum. Right now they're receiving, I believe it's 39%.
That's outrageous.
And now there's talks of cutting it back down to 32%. And now the police chief is saying, well, if you cut it to 32, we have to get rid of 105 citizen volunteers. We have to get rid of 79 officers.
Get rid of the volunteers.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of power-hungry punks.
Exactly. And, Jack, I know you got some strong opinions about the Grand Rapids Police Department as well.
Well, we did some pieces on our show revealing the corruption, and that wasn't even racial. That was where they gave a break to a friend of theirs that was drunk and wouldn't even give him a test. I think they finally did. So we used studies that showed how many minorities were stopped. On and on it goes. That's all empirical. There's no question about that. The racist part that's being disclosed is also accurate.
Mm-hmm.
The funding for the police, when our schools are starving to death and they're talking about having seniors go 2 days maybe out of the week, shows that things are way out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
Way. We can fund the military. We can fund the police. 33% of a city's budget.
32.
And let the schools starve. Does anybody see a problem with that balance?
Yep.
Because that's not balanced.
Yep. And then you have the police unions in Grand Rapids that are now fighting the budget cuts.
Oh, hell yes. No, that whole institution is under light, just like the other racist institutions. And let's hope that they're purged as well. You know, they think it a complete heresy to even suggest cutting their funding.
Yep. Well, the one thing we have to cut here on this show is we have to cut off the show because guess what? We're out of time again.
Zip.
Yep. Well, folks, that's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
And I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.